Good morning. Today is the 13th day of January 2017 and the continuing series of the human cycle with Kittu Reddy. Namaskar, Kittu.
Thank you, sir.
Where are we now?
Well, I will give you a quick summary in 5-6 minutes of where we have come to. Then I'll start developing the
Good.
ideas. Well, the basic ideas that you have to remember when you are reading this book is that number one, human society passes through certain psychological stages. Not rigid, not compartmentalized, but essentially psychological. These he terms as symbolic, typal, conventional, individualistic or rational and subjective. Then Sri Aurobindo, since the whole point of view is psychological, he writes a chapter on the ideal law of social development where he speaks of the ideal relationship between individual and individual, between individual and group, between group and group, between groups and humanity, etc., etc. And the method he suggests for bringing this ideal situation is self-realization. It is not an outer method. Essentially, it is an essentially inner method, self-realization. So since self-realization is the key to social development, and since society is based or made up of a very large number of individuals, the same process applies to the individual also. Therefore, instead of studying the society first, we study the individual. How he arrives at self-realization, the process. Inevitably, the first stage is that the individual identifies himself with the body, and only the body and physical consciousness. That is described as barbarism. Then he moves up to a slightly higher level, a distinctly higher level. In between there is something called the vital barbarism, which is all grasping, all possessing. But the next step is civilization. And civilization is that stage where the mind tends to become the ruler of the being. Why have I used the word tends? Because he says it is in your higher and better being that you allow yourself to be governed by the mind. But then, since we are not yet reached that stage, that is civilization. Culture is one step further, where every part of the being is governed by the higher mind and, if possible, by something still higher. So, a cultured man is entirely governed by, a fully cultured man is entirely governed by his highest being, which is almost close to the divine. Evidently, all of us are partially cultured. There are some parts that still are not under the influence of the divine, but this is a definition which we must keep in front of us as a goal to be achieved. Then, since he speaks of civilization and culture, he classifies, because culture is normally defined as the pursuit of the mental being for its own sake. Matthew Arnold had defined culture as the pursuit of the mental life for its own sake. But then Sri Aurobindo says that this word mental life can mean many things to many people. So it's a little equivocal. So he defines the mental life as the mental life of the senses, sensations, emotions, the dynamic, active or dynamic mental life, which we have discussed already, I think, last time. Then there are three higher parts. One is the ethical mind, one is the aesthetic mind, and apparently standing above these two is the intellectual mind. Next, he moves on to the ethical mind and the aesthetic mind. And since both are pursuing very different goals, so to say, there is often a clash between the ethical mind and the aesthetic mind. So, what is aesthetic might not be ethical to some people, and this is a big problem which all parents have to face. What video can I show to my son? All those who are censor boards have to face. It might be beautiful, but it is unethical, so we should not show it, etc., etc. So we will not go into detail of those conflicts, except to say that this conflict exists. And he has illustrated that the ancient Greek mind was predominantly dominated by the aesthetic sense. They did not have a very developed ethical sense. The Roman Empire, the Roman mind, the imperial Roman, was dominated very much by the ethical mind, but no, not much of aesthetic mind, etc., etc. So you see, that's why these two parts are different, aiming at different goals, and often there is a culture, a clash. So it is thought, it is believed, that the intellectual mind, which can stand detached and be an arbitrator between these two, can pronounce his judgment, right? So he uses the word seems. So we will analyze that, whether it is possible or not. So since we have spoken of the intellect, inevitably the next two chapters are, and the instrument which the intellect uses is the reason. So reason as governor of life, and office and limitations of the reason. Office means its function, and limitations means beyond which it is not capable of answering problems. So here he has analyzed the reason as governor of life. And he shows very clearly that reason is an instrument that can easily be bribed by its suitors. That is the vital being or the physical being. Yet it is very important to learn to detach oneself completely, objectivize. And so I'll just speak briefly about how true reason functions. I'm not speaking of the higher reason, how the scientific reason functions. A scientist, a true scientist, is always doing this. The first step is observe. That means collect data. Before I have an opinion about everything, I have to know all that is happening. So that is called collection of data. Then inevitably you have to classify them, because otherwise you can't analyze. So you classify them. So observation, classification, then there is analysis. This data which you have classified, you analyze. And after a long analysis, you arrive at what is called a conclusion. And then that conclusion has to be verified not once, not twice, but hundreds of times. This is the typical scientific method. Anything short of this is not typically rational scientific. It is unscientific in the sense that you allow a subjectivism to enter, right? So a rigorous scientist will follow these steps. The limitations become evident after some time when you find that the data that you have collected is not enough, there is much more data that is coming in. Inevitably, you have to change your viewpoint. And the history of science has been just this. In the ancient world, after observing the sky and the stars and the sun and their movements, they gave a theory. It is known as the Ptolemaic theory. The celestial sphere, the sun is there, the stars are there. It lasted for a few thousand years. Then Galileo and Copernicus discovered certain things which could not be explained by this theory. So, like a true scientist, honestly, they again started the game. And now they have built up what is known as the Copernican theory, where the Earth is not at the center of the universe, but it is on one of those elliptical orbits, right? And the whole view has changed completely. And there is no guarantee that there is a final view. When more data come in, more information come in, you will have to revise your theory. There is an aphorism written by Sri Aurobindo where he mentions this, that they believe this, and might be, or inevitably at a certain stage you will believe this. So this is the reason's way of functioning. And in the modern world, science has done tremendous things. I mean, it has really changed the world in many ways, very positively also, and sometimes negatively. The question that arises now is the mind the final instrument of knowledge, or will there always be something that will slip out? So there are two types of intellectual thinkers, scientists. One who believe that we cannot grasp the whole of the truth. And they believe that we have to come to some higher instrument. And this is very uniquely, the greatest scientists have said this, whether it is Einstein, or it is Newton, or it is other scientists. They believe that there is, but they don't have the power to arrive at that, but they believe that there is. There is another group of thinkers in the world who believe that although we have not yet arrived, we are bound to arrive collectively, that the mind is the highest instrument of knowledge. So this conflict is going on all the time. And Sri Aurobindo says that those who cannot see that there is a higher instrument base themselves on two articles of faith. And here is the beauty of Sri Aurobindo. One article of faith is that I believe that my reason is right and only my reason is right. Now this is inevitably, as Sri Aurobindo explains, a part of our egoistic response. But, and this is the beauty of Sri Aurobindo, he says it is also a very useful tool, because if you are not convinced of what you believe, how will you act? Right? So you have to be convinced that what I am saying is right and I am going to do this, right? Then experience and life will teach you that this is not the real thing. I do not know whether I should tell you. There are a few people in the ashram who believe that what you are doing is a waste of time. This recording of, right? Go directly to Sri Aurobindo's books. Now you would not be doing these things unless you are convinced that there is a certain point of view and a certain truth. Correct?
Yes.
But when you stand back, you might say that they have a point which is also right, right? But I have to act now according to my belief and my conviction. This is very important because it is a fact. So many people have come and told me that all this is waste. I said, I don't know, waste or not waste, but I will continue speaking when he asks me. So you see now, if you have doubts in your mind whether I am doing right or wrong, you can't act. You see, that is why, although it might be an egoistic movement, still it has its justification. So this is, I find this one of the most beautiful aspects of Sri Aurobindo, that in even what we call our egoism, he gives you a reason for its place, and then you have to gradually overcome it. And the second article of faith is that even if the individual reason has not arrived at the whole of the truth, the collective reason will arrive at it someday or the other. So in Europe, in the West, there are these two groups of scientists. Newton, Einstein, they believe that there is something else that we need to get. The other group of scientists, also top, they believed, I might not have arrived, but we will arrive. The group will arrive. So in any case, Sri Aurobindo is quite clear that reason is not the highest instrument of truth. It's a very powerful instrument and a very indispensable instrument, but it is not the highest instrument of truth. So that is where the office and the limitations of the reason come in. And the reason why it cannot go beyond is inbuilt in the very way reason functions. It depends on data, which is always ever expanding. It depends on classifications, which is very often artificial. So inevitably, if these two are not safe, how can you have a good analysis and a conclusion? So, see, practically, when you go and ask mother a problem, a thing has happened and you want a solution for that, mother gets not detailed information about everything. She gets a certain amount of information, and then the rest is God knows, something else, some other power, no? But I can't do that, you can't do that, and the Prime Minister of a country can't do that. He has to get all the information because he has to answer back by reason. So the instrument itself, I won't say is defective, but it is limited by its way of functioning. And any other way of functioning means you are bringing in a subjective element. Then it is not rational. Correct? So this is the reason as governor of life and the office and limitations of the reason. Then afterwards there is a very, very fundamental idea that Sri Aurobindo has brought in, which is a very important part of this book. There are two ideas. One is that the human being is constituted of 5 searchings or 5 parts which are searching for something. One is the seeking for knowledge. The primary instrument is reason. The seeking for beauty through the aesthetic being. The seeking for good through the ethical being. The seeking for God through the religious being. And the seeking for the fulfillment of life through the vital being. Every one of us have got it in varying proportions. The intellectual, the scholar is more in the seeking for knowledge. The artist is more in the seeking for beauty. The politician is seeking for life and the fulfillment of life, etc., etc. The God man, religious, right? So this is one thing. 5 parts in our being, 5 seekings. All of them evolve through 3 stages: the infrarational, the rational, and the suprarational. So again another classification. In all of us, there is a very strong infrarational element, physical vital, which impacts our decisions. Then when you try to govern your life by reason, that is the rational life. When you see that the reason cannot give you the satisfaction, or if it happens in a flash, you try to open out to something beyond the reason. So there is infrarational, rational, suprarational. Every one of these 5 parts go through these 3 stages. My first knowledge is instinctive. Then by analysis and study it becomes rational. Then I open out to higher world, it becomes intuitive. So infrarational knowledge, rational knowledge, suprarational knowledge. The first feeling of beauty is instinctive. A child, instinctively he feels this is beauty and this is not beautiful. Then you go through a training period. And then criticism and etc. etc. So that is rational beauty. It never satisfies. The true beauty is always that which comes from above. Music, art, painting, anything. It comes from some other touch. Ethics. I like you because you are nice to me. The moment you are not nice to me, I don't like you. That is infrarational ethics. Rational ethics means you set up a standard. But then you find after some time that none of these standards really satisfy. So then you have to go above. And the Gita is a perfect example of supra-rational ethics. Here is a gentleman who is asked to kill his own gurus, right? Bhishma and Drona. And Arjuna is having a terrific conflict, ethical conflict. And Krishna enters into the picture and says, abandon all dharmas, all these ethical standards, and listen to the inner voice. Right? Which means that ultimately you have to decide. This is very practical. Huh? Many times you do not know what is good and what is not good. And if you are sensitive and open, we are taught all the time to do this. We are told all the time to do this. Open yourself to the mother and Shri Aurobindo, and she will tell you what to do. It might be completely irrational in somebody's eyes, right? So ethics also goes through these 3 stages. Religion, on the whole, generally, is very infrarational. You try to sober it down, right? So secularism is one of those attempts, right? But true religion is bowled out. Nothing can happen, right? So there is a story which Vivekananda gave. There was a young boy of 11, 12 who used to go every day to one sadhu who used to tell him stories of these great spiritual personalities. And generally they used to live in the Himalayas. He would listen and absorb and absorb and absorb. By the time he became 14 and started thinking, he asked him, are all these really true? Is it possible to find out? He said, of course. Next day, he left house, went to the Himalayas, plunged into their search, and after 10 or 12 years, they found him there, completely transformed. So you see, now this is the effect of the suprarational touch. And I would like to believe that most or almost all who have turned to the ashram and come to the ashram have often sacrificed enormous material and other satisfactions because they have been touched by something here which they cannot explain or which they can explain to themselves, but which is so powerful that it overrides everything. So there are people who are appointed Supreme Court judges. They are not interested. Came here, washing vessels. A Supreme Court judge sitting here and washing vessels, doing gate duty, all given up, right? Now this is not a normal phenomenon. This is because you have been touched by some other power. So religion also goes through this. And now life. Life by its very definition is vital. But all of us, the very fact that we are trying to be civilized means that we are controlling our life impulses by the reason. Right? So you see, the fact that I am civilized, that I am a decent human being, means that I have controlled my impulses by my reason. I see a man coming whom I know is a rotten man and he wants to stay in my guest house. The first thing that I would like to tell him, you bloody fool, get out. But my reason comes and tells me, that is not the way of talking. You are a civilized human being. You tell him politely that I am sorry, the rooms are all booked or whatever it is. Correct? So civilization is simply this mental effort, right? But the most beautiful acts, the noblest acts in life are always suprarational. See, now this is very important. Love between human beings, especially between man and woman, is it infrarational, rational or suprarational? Vital, mental or spiritual? Simple. Usually 95%, 98%. Vital, mental or spiritual?
Has to be a combination.
Huh?
Has to be a combination of all.
But 95% is a combination of spiritual, mental and vital?
Vital.
I think it is vital physical. Right? Then mental comes in. The evolved beings might be vital mental. And the seekers will be vital mental spiritual. So love normally is something that is considered the opposite of spirituality. In spiritual life, don't fall in love. So I'll tell you an actual story. One day in the knowledge notice board, they put up a notice where mother had said that what is the point in coming to the ashram to lead a spiritual life and then starting falling in love again, all over again. Right? Young men, 19, 20, 21, they read it and they didn't like it at all. They said, that's true. But then, so they discovered and found out another quotation of the mother, where mother says, but if you happen to fall in love, don't try to break it. Raise it to the highest. It can become a springboard to move towards the divine. Right? But you go to any institution, spiritual institution, they will advise you very clearly, don't fall in love. Fall in love only with the divine. Mother says, if you happen to fall in love with a human being, raise it to the divine. So you see, even love can become beautiful. All true patriots, they love their country and are ready to sacrifice everything. No calculations. Right? So you can find this in love. Sri Aurobindo says you can find it in business, in economics. You work only for making money to help the whole world, nothing for yourself. You can do that in politics, more difficult, where you want power, but only to help the people. I will tell you an anecdote which 1 month back I got. A young man, P.V., but not a young man, middle-aged man, P.V. Patel. Somebody sent him to me. You will like him very much. The first thing he told me is that I am 100% transparent. You can ask me anything you like. I will answer everything, right? I don't like crookedness and dissimulation. And the second reason why I have come to meet you is that I have been told that you have a liking for Narendra Modi. So I want to tell you that I have been his classmate for more than 12 years. From the age of 6 till we passed out or graduated, we were together. And I knew him very well. And even at the age of 15, 16, he used to always tell me that I am not interested in power. I don't want power. He said that don't be a fool. You want to help the world, you want to change the world, and if you are not in power, who will listen to you? You must get into power, and only then can you do something. So Narendra Modi thought for some time. He said, if I want to help the world as I am, nobody will listen to me a single thing, but I must have the power, but I must not be attached to power. I said, that is ideal. If he has done it, it is very good. That is an individual judgment which you have to make. But the important thing is that when power is used from that point of view, it is very high and very good. And the most wonderful example is Sri Aurobindo himself. Why did he take up yoga? He loved his country. He was fighting for the freedom of his country. He was organizing revolutionary groups. Someone told him that all this that you are doing is Kshatriya Tej. But there is a greater power that is called Brahma Tej. He asked, how do I get that Brahma Tej? For what? For the freedom of the country. Go and do yoga. Then he started yoga. What was the purpose? To get power. Right? And then Sri Aurobindo is an example, perfect example, how power can be used. So for a few years it was external politics, but right till the end of his life, he has interacted on the world, on the political, economic, every possible level, but silently, with another power. He was not sitting idly and doing nothing. He was plunged in the activities of the world, but not plunged physically, plunged psychologically from that higher power. And why did he bring the supermind? Why did he try to bring it down? He himself says, when India got free in 1947, so somebody asked him that, so the supramental power is working? He said, not yet. It is the overmind power that did this thing. Otherwise I wouldn't have got it in 2 packets. Right? When the supermind will come, it will become 1 packet. See, so he wanted to make that power effective. Effective means power, changing things, no? So he brought down the supramental consciousness first in his body in 1950. In 1956, Mother brought it into the world consciousness. Now, according to Mother, it has spread all over. Those who are capable of feeling it or receiving it, they will feel it. And there is nothing to feel, uneasy, because as Mother said, when the first mental activity started, millenniums or at least thousands of years back, till now it has taken such a long time for the development. So now that the supramental has established itself in the earth consciousness, little by little, it will not take thousands and millions of years, but it will take certainly a few centuries probably. You will become aware, or you will start feeling, or you will become receptive to that higher power. So that is life, no? So when you have to face a problem and take a decision, you have to try to call that higher power. So that will depend on your opening, on each individual. That you have. So anyway, this is the. Then in the last 7 chapters or so, Sri Aurobindo comes back to society. And just as there is an infrarational stage in the individual life, there is also an infrarational stage in the social life. He calls that the infrarational age of the society, where you are not guided primarily by reason, but primarily by your instincts, vital intuitions, feelings. And in many cases, you find that they are very advanced in some ways, but they don't have that typical analytical reason, which is the greatest governing principle today. So that is one chapter. Here he is speaking of society, and that is why you must understand this, that many people think that the Vedic age was the golden age, the age of suprarational society. It was an infrarational society, with spiritual seekers right at the top, spiritual rishis, who were trying to impact the infrarational society to the extent possible. And that is exactly why they had to write the Veda in a double language, where they appeal to the items of nature, cow, horse, dawn, this, that, which the physical mind will understand. But those who had the insight and the deeper thing, they could see that this was something else. See, this was the result. This is the main reason why this confusion has taken place in the European mind. They looked only at the outside and they concluded that we are the barbarians. But all India, right from the beginning to the end, it says that that was, the rishis were, personalities of the highest order. So, this contradiction had to be solved. And Sri Aurobindo understood that it was this double language. Because if they had spoken in that higher language, nothing would have happened. It would have gone clean over the head, right? So, through this, they tried little by little, to raise the people up. So, that was the infrarational age. The rational age came about in the 15th, 16th century. The Reformation and the Renaissance triggered off a rejection of the church and the subjective stage and the predominance of reason. Today, the world is generally rational. In simple, what I mean is that every act that I do in collective life, I have to explain by reason. Whether in politics or economics or even in a flat. If my neighbor is there and I am here, and he says, I will use my own life as I like, I will drink as much as I want, what the hell does it matter to you? You have no right to interfere in his life. But if he comes at night and knocks at your door and makes a noise and starts vomiting all over the place, then you have a right to interfere. Right? So you have to allow everybody to govern his life by his reason. That is the rational age. And the two fruits of the rational age in public life are what we call democracy and socialism. Democracy is the direct application of reason to collective life. I'll see, I'll try to read out a few, just a little bit of that. He says, I just read portions here and there. So long as the old method of mentalizing life served its purpose, there was no necessity for men in the mass to think out their ways of life by the aid of the reason. You accepted customs, traditions, respect for somebody, you didn't bother. But when these began to fail, inevitably reason comes up. So he says, man may for a time, for a long time even, live by the mere tradition of things, whose reality he has lost, but not permanently. The necessity of questioning all his conventions and traditions arises, and by that necessity, reason gets the first real chance of an entire self-development. If you are following the news on the TV, India is facing an acute problem on this. There is something called Kittu in Tamil Nadu, where they play with those bulls, trying to tame them. And now, it is a traditional sport. It has been going on for hundreds of years in Tamil Nadu. Supreme Court wants to put a ban on Jallikattu.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
They are governing themselves by reason. Reason can accept no tradition, no convention. Correct? Who is right, I don't know. So the people of Tamil Nadu are furious. So yesterday, 398 villages, to hell with the Supreme Court, they have organized their own Jallikattu. Not that big scale, but they have done it. See, this constant conflict between tradition and reason. Reason will accept no convention, reason will accept no tradition, reason will not accept if everybody says the same thing. Why are you saying it? You have to give me an answer. Correct? 100 people say this man is great. I don't know why he is great. Please explain to me. This is the movement of reason today. Now, inevitably, this will lead to a universal questioning. Questioning by, in all the details of life. Why should I do this? Why should this be done? Why should that be done? So therefore there has to be an answer also. And this has to be done by what is called a reason which is to be universally applied. Inevitable, logical. If there is a universal questioning, you have to solve these problems by a kind of universal application of the reason universally for every problem. Now comes the next problem. Universal reasoning. Whose reasoning? Reasoning in every aspect of life, I understand. But whose? So, is it going to be the elite? Sri Aurobindo says the rest will not understand. Is it going to be the reason of those who are in power? They will inevitably misuse it for their own ends. So it has to be the reason of each and every one. Hence arises the democratic principle. Everyone can vote after the age of 18. Why 18? Because they have decided that after the age of 18, reason is developed. Who can vote? A criminal, a lunatic, you, me, Prime Minister, the most ordinary man. So this is the application of the age of reason which brings in democracy. Right? So it is believed that you will be able to apply inevitably this reason, and since reason is the highest instrument of life, reason will solve all the problems. That is the belief. Then Sri Aurobindo says, in practice it is found that these ideas will not hold for a long time. For the ordinary man is not yet a rational being, emerging from a long infrarational past. He is not naturally able to form a reasonable judgment, but thinks either according to others who are more intelligent than him, or according to traditions, or according to customs. It is not a free mind. So, although the theory is wonderful and it is desirable, but it will fail. So, I will take up the next part a little later.
Yes.
So, the last sentence, there comes thus to be a wide gulf between the ideal and the first results of its practice. And look at modern society. Almost all the nations are democratic today. Where is the democracy? When do you exercise your democracy? Once in 5 years or once in 4 years? In America, you have exercised your democratic spirit and put Trump on the top. Might not be by a big majority, but the majority. In India and England, in England I don't know, but in India we elect after 5 years. In France after 7 years. After that, is there any democracy? Once Trump is coming to power in another week, next Friday he'll be the president of. He's going to take all his decisions with a small group of his own. He has selected. His attitude towards China will be very different from what Obama had done. His attitude towards the Muslims will be very different from what the previous ones had done. A huge number of Americans in New York are holding processions, shouting, "Down, down, Trump." But then you have elected him. So you see, democracy in practice is once in 5 years. Or once in 4 years, whatever it is, right? The rest of the time, we can express ourselves only through movements, protests, associations, gatherings, shouting in New York, getting 1 million people, etc., and the media. Go on writing something. And let us have no illusion that the social media is not ineffective. I have seen in the last 1, 2, 3 months, somebody has taken a position, the social media has blasted him. And when he finds that 90% of that side, he quietly shifts. Because we are all very much slaves to public opinion.
Thank you, Kittu. We look forward to continuing this.
No, there is still some more interesting things. Because democracy, why inevitably the rational age will lead you to socialism. See, many Americans don't like socialism at all. Democracy, democracy, democracy. The East European world is very much on socialism. And they look down on democracy sometimes. But you must realize that both democracy and socialism are the fruits of reason. It is not that they are irrational. They are as rational as you are. Right? So, Sri Aurobindo goes one step further and he says the best form of government is democratic socialistic, where you harmonize both. Or if not harmonize, at least bring to some kind of rapprochement. Don't pit one against the other. Right? Well, I think life itself is compelling you, whether you like or not. Even the American government has moved very much towards socialism when they are giving to those who don't earn any money, they're giving government salary. Why should they give government salary? Who asked them not to earn? So now we are moving more and more towards socialism. The disabled physically, the disabled mentally. The government takes responsibility. 100 years back, they didn't care for you. So this is the impact of socialism, which is an inevitable growth of the reason. There is one sentence which I will find out next time and tell you. An age of reason is always an age of progress. If you are truly rational, you are bound to progress. But the word is truly. Not if you use reason to play your tricks. If you are truly trying through reason to find out the truth, you are bound to progress. And one more step I will tell you, if you are truly rational, you are bound to land in spirituality. No way. Because spirituality is the culmination of reason. So you climb up the ladder and then you will find that I have to go still more. And then you have entered the spiritual world. See, and Mother and Sri Aurobindo were exactly that. See, Ramakrishna directly from the heart, he went into the divine, right? But Mother, they had of course the heart, but this also was there. They developed their mind to its highest extent and went beyond. And that is a very good example for the world. Everybody can't be a Ramakrishna, but today hundreds of people are intellectual, thinking seriously, going higher. Then they go beyond. So,
Thank you.